Welcome Maplings to another masterclass on how to draw map components. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive look onto how to draw trees. Now I have two tree styles that I do. I have a top down, it's very Google Maps like, but today we're going to be taking a look at something that you might be inclined to call isometric, but it's not. Really, this is my elevated style. It's some call it a Lord of the Rings style. It's a bird's eye view, and as you can see on the screen here, this is a stylistic approach. It's extremely pleasing to the eye. It's very suitable for fantasy maps. Things are a little abstracted, you know, the size of settlements or ruins in relation to hills and mountains or trees. It's not scale perfect, but that's not the objective. The objective is to actually do something that almost looks like it was drawn by a cartographer in your world and is a great player handout. It is a visual treat, without a doubt. Now, as you can see on the screen, we're actually looking at a lot of components here. Hills, mountains, settlements, and we're going to get to them another time. Today, though, we are going to be looking at these tree components and how to draw them. And here's the real kicker. It's devilishly simple. Criminally, almost. So, without further ado, let's take a look at what's involved here. Now, I've kind of prepared a little canvas here and I've dropped some trees onto this map just to show you what this is going to end up looking like. By combining single trees together, especially single trees that have been drawn slightly differently, and overlapping them, you can create small copses or even big woods and forests. But we can also, and we'll take a look at this, draw copses together as clusters of trees. So without further ado, you can see what we're going to be looking at here. We have our sort of deciduous trees rolling on over into our evergreens, our pines. We have some jungle trees that we're going to be taking a look at today, and dead trees. Because what is a swamp or a marsh or an undead land without having a few dead trees thrown in there for good measure? So, without further ado, let's make sure we got our black on. Let's make sure that we have the appropriate brush. And I'm thinking something like pen pressure of about 5. Let's start there. Now, one word on this. I'm drawing on a Cintiq 24-inch HD Touch. I'm using Photoshop. But you can actually do this electronically in Procreate, GIMP, anything like that. This also works for ink on paper, by the way. Just the colouring is going to be a little bit difficult. You're going to take a different approach. But I found that using colouring pencils, using colouring actually watercolours on this works really well. This is something that I did originally ink on paper, so it totally works. So the general approach is going to be exactly the same. So let's start with our deciduous trees here. I'm going to describe this as almost drawing a little cloud, okay? And one thing you'll notice, by the way, is this is not really elevated. This is not really bird's eye. And it's certainly not isometric. These almost look like they're side on, maybe slightly above, and that's all down to the length that you draw the tree trunks. So we're basically going to draw a tree side on. And for these little puppies here, it is as simple as draw the shape of the tree outline first. And you'll notice I'm kind of creating these little poofs of clouds. I'm going to draw another one right next to it. And this one I'm going to make a little rounder. Two trees. Slightly different shapes. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to add the tree texture. The insinuation of leaves, some branches underneath. But I'm going to favour the bottom right side. And just a little bit on the other side. Now why am I doing that? Well, I tend to put my shadows coming from the top left or my source of light is from the top left. My shadows are therefore coming down to the bottom right. So I'm putting a little bit more ink on the right side there. And later on when we colour, we're going to put the highlights on the left. There's our baseline. I'm going to draw the tree trunks. Now the thing with the tree trunk is you could go short, like so. That totally works. You could actually go a little bit longer if you wanted. I like to do not too tall, except for trees where I really want the canopy of the tree, so to speak, the branches to be a lot higher up. This is a jungle tree we're going to take a look at. So I'm going to keep the trunks fairly small. Let's do another one. Let's make this almost completely round. Same approach. A little irregularity, by the way, is a good thing. Makes all of the trees together look very different. One thing you can also do a little branch coming off like so. Now, they look fine. There's nothing wrong with these. But another thing you can do is add a little bit of ground texture. And you'll notice that I have that here. Notice that I did some little sprigs of grass. So just a little bit of ground texture like so. Maybe a sprig of grass like here. It helps pull the ink of the tree onto the canvas. It's now not just a standalone tree, but it's something that's part of its environment. It's part of the ground around it. You could even do maybe some little roots coming off the sides like so. Again, a little sprig of grass. Maybe at the top of the grass we'll do insinuation like a little bloom, or like a cattail type of pod at the top there. Now these are all individual trees, but that little bit of ground texture around it, as you can see, really helps bring it in. We're going to colour those in a moment. We're going to move on to our next style. Now our next style is these evergreens right here. Now the thing with these is if you draw the evergreens like a Christmas tree, and I'm going to do this to begin with, is it kind of looks a bit weird. So if you did this, I mean, yeah, sure, that works, but it's not quite as good, right? So let's get rid of this. So while we want to capture the spirit of the shape of the tree, less is more in this particular instance. So definitely a tall triangular shape. You can do them very thin, very tall. You can do them a little squatter, but triangle is kind of that shape that we're going for here, right? So what I do is I do like just a little bit of texturing and shape to the outside, not too much. Let's get a little bit going there, and then let's just bring this up, and let's do another one. Let's make this maybe a squatter, fatter one. Now with these, I like to go slightly taller with my tree trunks. Notice I gave this a unique little tree trunk of having a little branch off to one side. And again, just a little bit of grass, a little bit of texture around them. Just a couple of dots right here. There we go. Now, with this, we don't want to actually do these little poofy shapes. That actually doesn't look too bad, but I'm kind of underscoring it. We don't want to do too much of that. What we want is slightly more pointed leaves on this one, right? So I'm actually going to do more like this. Again, I'm keeping my ink work to the bottom right, less on the other side. So this is just, I'm jaggling my brush up and down here. Very little on the other side. Let's do a third. Let's do a third one. We've got 3 deciduous. Let's do 3 evergreens. let's maybe make this nice and tall. And again, a little bit of imperfection on them is good. It adds variety into your trees. And trees aren't perfect, right? They're not perfectly symmetrical. They have little bits coming off on the sides. These little imperfections that you add will actually, to the eye, make things just look that little bit more believable. Let's do a little bit of branch coming off the other side. Let's give this guy a root system right there. A little bit of ground texture. Done. That are the beginning of our evergreens. Next type, we're going to do jungle. Now, jungle trees are very unique. You know, they've got these big, broad leaves, and you can see that that's what we're doing here. The principle, however, is the same. They're almost like a round oval shape. They have this smooth canopy on the top because all of these big trees are draping down. So for these, I tend to start something like this. It kind of gives me my tree top, and then I start to imagine that the actual leaves are coming down like so. And you'll notice on this particular style, there's way more leaf on this. It's less abstract. Let's do a smaller one. Let's do a smaller one. And you'll notice that I'm kind of drawing these extra leaves, these extra details on the right side again. So it just puts a little bit more ink on the right, with my light source being on the top left. Now here, I like to do long, tall trunks. Same principle on the ground. Let's do a third. And a nice long trunk on this one. There we go. Got a nice little row of trees here. Now, the other type are dead trees. Now, dead trees, no leaves, so it's all branches. You could do dead deciduous, dead pine, you know, the evergreen, and dead the tree of woe. Very sort of Conan the Barbarian, very sort of fantasy like, these twisted chaos land type affairs. And we've even got some dead jungle trees right there. So with those, you are literally drawing the tree, trunk and branches. So I'm just going to do one or two right here. Let's just move our layer up above the grass. So for these, I tend to start with the trunk, and think about the tree that you're drawing. Is this a deciduous? Is this evergreen? It influences the shape of the branches nevertheless, right? So in the case of maybe a deciduous one, we've got these main branches coming off. You'll notice I'm drawing kind of two lines for the thickness, but then we have the single lines for the smaller branches coming off here. There are no leaves, nothing like that. Dead tree. Maybe something coming off the side, like so. Now on the Tree of Woe style, keep it squatter, keep the trunk fatter, and draw like almost a wider, more twisted shape than you would normally see in real life. So I'm going to still start with the bottom. I'd like to get pretty good root system on my twisted trees. And we're going to do this fat trunk. Or naturally twisted, as if the forces themselves of chaos had been at work here. And then, again, 2 lines. Fat branches. We'll drop this one behind, like so. And then individuals. Branches coming off. Less is more, by the way, with this. Let the tree itself, the main thickness of it, like sort of come through as the chaos factor. And you can make them a little sort of taller, but again, sort of keep them fairly fat. Twist that branch, or twist that trunk and the branches. Like it's almost these impossible shapes. Like so. So that's our ink work. Nice and simple, right? Let's talk about coloring. And I'm actually going to then show you a trick to get the shadows. And we're going to do the shadows first, okay? And we'll show you 1 or 2. We don't need to draw or color every single one. The principle is exactly the same. So now, there's 2 ways of doing the shadows. If you're doing this electronically, it's easier. If you're doing this ink on paper, it's a little bit harder. You have to kind of eyeball it. Here's the electronic version. I'm going to create a new layer. Underneath my ink layer, I'm actually going to get a nice soft brush for this one. So let's pick soft. And I'm still going to do pen pressure size on it. And I'm actually going to do this in a grey. You could do a like a green on this, but I find that grey just works just fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually colouring in the tree itself. Now I'm actually doing this a little rough. There are some gaps, and it doesn't matter. It's okay. Lighten up the grey towards the top. Darken the grey a touch at the bottom. Don't go too crazy. Don't worry about it being sloppy. Don't worry about it even if it spills outside a little bit. It doesn't matter. Don't forget to get the trunk itself. Don't worry about the ground. And then you do this. I've hit transform. Rotate it 90 degrees. Squish it down. Position it off to the right. I'm actually going to squish it a little bit more. Like so. And then drop some opacity on that. It's literally that easy. It's literally that easy. Now, I used grey there as an example so you could see what I'm talking about a lot clearer than, let's say, here. But you can absolutely use a black colour. Just don't forget to give it a soft brush, okay, with a soft edge. You almost want it to feather out. And you could do, like, less shadowing at the top versus just a lighter colouring. But then you get this thickness of colour at the bottom and it lightens out. And then you just twist it off to one side like so. Let's do another one. Let's do one on the pine tree right here. And this time what we're going to do is I'm going to come into the dark green realm here. Something like Something like that. I'm going to keep my brush with its soft edge. I'm going to make this a little bigger. And this time I'm going to hit the bottom of the tree more. And I'm actually just going to start feathering out to almost nothing at the top. This is a slightly different way of doing it. Don't forget to get the actual tree trunk in there. And then again, we're going to twist this sucker. We're going to squidge it down. Position it off to the right. Throw on a good amount of opacity. I'm hitting about 45-50% on the opacity. Done. Now, if you can't do that, because maybe you're ink on paper, you do have to eyeball it. But it's actually not too difficult. Again, I'm using a brush with a lot of feather on it. But you could easily do this with pencils, coloring pencils. You could do this with a little bit of watercolor. Obviously layering up those layers of the water to get a darker sort of base. But similar sort of principle. Look at the shape of your tree. I'm going to do a squished version of it. Now I'm using green still here. And a lot more sort of there towards the base. So yeah, you've got to abstract it a little bit, but principle still the same. I'm doing this electronically, so I tend to do this style of approach. Now you'll notice here, what I'm really doing on these is I have a lot of opacity, and I've actually, I tend to use black as my base color. It takes that little bit longer to get it dialed in, but it's exactly the same principle as this. Now, with those done, let's actually throw in a layer for coloring. And this is how you color. Now, you can color green, yellow, a little blue-green. There's no right or wrong answer here. You can see I've got a smorgasbord of different colors that I've used. The principle is exactly the same. I'm going to do green to begin with. I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to color underneath the ink. Again, a little imperfection is absolutely fine. I'm going to go a touch darker. And I'm just going to, on the bottom right, I'm going to give it a little bit more shadow. You see that? Light source hitting it from the other side. Speaking of which, highlights, lighter color on the other side. And you can see how I've done that on the other trees right there. I'm actually going to keep with the lighter color. And then I'm actually going to slide this a little bit, I think, towards a little bit of a blue. So let's pick up on, let's say, this right there. I'm going to hit the darker. And you could really experiment with the colours on this, by the way. Throw in some reds, you know what I mean? Get those autumn colours in there. Just slide this up to the lighter colour. And by the way, the lighter colours, you could go pretty light and just stroke underneath your little highlights or your branches right there, like so. Let's do something that's a little bit more yellow. Let's slide our color in that direction. Let's hit a baseline of this one. Now you'll notice I've not done the trunks yet because those are going to be brown, but they're going to follow the same sort of principle. Let's go darker. Like so. Then let's go lighter. And by the way, it's the same principle for these here. It's no different at all. So let's get a little bit of green. Let's come in with our darker right here. And then let's really slide up to the lighter over here. you know what? Let's really make this pop. Like so. Now, on these other examples here, you'll see that some of them are quite a bit dark on the other side. And I'm tending to follow the shape of the tree. So on something like a pine, it's almost vertical, the difference between the light and dark. While on these rounder trees, there's actually a nice little curve right there. And likewise on like this one, you can see this. It's a tall round tree, so the curvature is slightly less, but it's still there. So follow the shape of the tree. These are already beginning to take shape. Let's get the tree trunks in. Now, tree trunks obviously we're sliding towards a brown color. Very, very, very simple. If you've got branches coming off the sides, and don't forget to hit those. Likewise, even like on the dead trees over here, you would still do them exactly the same, but most of it is kind of, the wood is exposed. That's okay. And then, lighter and darker, shadows and highlights. The highlights, where the light would hit it, like so. Obviously this one, we haven't actually done the darker color, but that's okay. It gives you the principle of it. Here, just a little bit on that side. Be careful. It doesn't matter, by the way, if you come up right underneath the tree, but remember, right underneath the tree would probably be in shadow, so keep that dark. So I'm just going to do the highlights first here. And then I'm actually going to bring it right down into the dark color. If you want to go that extra length, get right underneath the tree right there. Like so. Nice, simple. So, then, we pretty much have our trees complete. We go through these others in a similar sort of style. Let's get this in here. Let's get a couple of highlights on this. There we go. Let's colour in the branches. Let's make this a nice dark green as a base. The base colour, let's call it the foundation. You can just go all over, because then you'll do highlights and lowlights separately. There we go. Highlight. There we go. Now here I'm hitting the individual leaves. You could see that. The outside edge of those leaves. Same sort of principle though. Exactly the same principle. And then let's hit a darker colour. And I'm actually going to hit underneath the leaves a little bit. So I'm thinking about the shape and how things are falling onto each other. There we go. Let's do the same here. That's it. So easy, right? So easy. Now, if you then take these individual trees and you overlap them, you could start to build copses up, just like you can see right there. But you can actually go straight into drawing these. Going to go back to the hard round pen pressure size. You could draw cops directly. So let's end with that. So I'm going to mix some evergreens and deciduous together on this one right here. So let's oh, by the way, start from the front and go backwards. If you go backwards, forwards, it's going to be a little bit harder to do. So let's do the foreground trees first. I feel like my pen's gone bigger. Let's make our pen a little bit smaller. Let's make this a 5. Okay. So, tree shape. I'm just going to do the tree shapes first, okay? Tree shape. Let's get another tree close to it. Maybe a little taller and fatter. A hint of triangle to this one. Because we're going to throw in pine tree back here. Now this is why I'm going from the forefront to the background. Because I could draw behind what I've already drawn here. So let's get another one. Maybe, actually, let's mix another one of these in. Right here. And then, maybe we got another one right here. That's going to be the base of the tree right there. And let's finish it with another tree right here. Now, a little bit of ink. Following the tree leaf shape on the right side. Not too much. There we go. Let's do one in the background here. Nice. And here. And it's okay to have a little bit of texture on the left, just don't do as much of it on the left. There we go. Tree trunks. Same principle that we've done before, right? Don't forget the ground texture. Tall for the pines. We're not going to see anything back there, but we are still going to do the ground texture for this. And then we're going to color this. And we're going to actually do the shadows first. So I'm actually going to stick with black. I'm going to do a soft brush for this. And lots of opacity, okay? So we're going to push probably a little on the large size, but that's okay. We'll make do. Okay, let's make this a little smaller. Now, one thing that you're going to notice here is if I rotate this, all my actual trunks are going to be in the wrong position, so I'm not going to do the trunks. I'm just going to rotate this right now. I'm going to squish this way down. I'm going to bring this out like so. We're going to drop a lot of opacity on this. There we go, that's looking pretty good. Now, obviously, we've got shadows falling on trees that would not have a shadow on them. So, for example, this tree in the background here is casting a shadow onto this tree right here. We don't have to worry about that because we're going to color over the top of that. And now here, this tree, did I not color that one? So we're going to actually get a little bit of shadow for this tree here. I think this needs to be extended a little bit. I didn't give it enough. That's okay. I think maybe just a wick a bit more here. Get the tree trunk in there. Get the tree trunk in there. I think that works. I think that works nicely. Now, if for touching this up, and you'll notice I've done that in a few locations here, you can get an eraser on it with a nice soft edge on the eraser and just soften up some of those edges right there. I'm not going to do that right now. What we're going to do is we're going to get our coloring layer, and I'm going to actually change our brush back to... There we go. And we're going to slide towards our greens. But we'll do greens towards yellow just a little bit. Let's do a baseline. And I'm going to vary up, by the way, some of these colours. So we've got a nice little variety in this patch right here. So I'm actually going to do them one at a time. Shadow right there. Highlights. Like so. Set the tree behind. Let's just vary this up a touch in our colour. Alternating up how I'm doing this. I'm hitting the highlights first. Lowlights. Let's really slide this puppy towards a blue here. Let's have some fun with this. So there's a little puppy in the background. He's got a little bit of colour going on back there. And don't forget the highlights. Just a touch, because most of it is actually behind that tree right there. How about something that's really towards the yellow-orange sort of spectrum? Well, how about you in the background here? You can have a little bit of this treatment. And then darker. Like so. Touch a highlight. There we go. Get that crown of the tree in there. How about something towards the red? Let's bring that up here. Let's do this guy in the foreground. Good strong shadow on that side. Strong highlights on that side. And then the final two. Highlights. Lowlights. Go. Now I'm actually going to put a little bit of low light on this tree here. Just breaking up some of these, the highlights, because we've got other trees clustered around it. There's probably less highlights lower down on the branches, right? Likewise with this one right here. So just thinking about how the shadows would hit each other, where they would fall. That red tree actually looks quite pretty. That in combination with like the yellow, a little mixture of those, starts to feel like autumn. It'd be beautiful. Okay, so let's get our tree trunks in. Slide towards the brown spectrum. Little bit on the ground too. There we go. Let's give you one just right in the background there. There we go. Highlights. And then low lights. Let's go a little darker. Right underneath. Up to one side. There we go. Just like that. A little bit of ground detail with using the same brown. Cops of trees. That easy. That easy. And then, like I say, you can take your individual trees and lay them like so. Take another one right here. Oops. Let's leave him here right there. Maybe we take these guys in. We bring them down like so. And that's how you could create a copse, a woods, or even a massive forest. Just like that. I hope that you have found this to be entertaining and informative. Overall, I think the skill set is probably a medium, not too difficult. If you have enjoyed it, please hit me up with a like, hit me up with a follow, and ask me what you would like to see next. I will see you in the next tutorial. Thank you, everyone.